I'm going to share my PowerPoint, and much like Pankaj has sort of outlined in his talk, there is a lot of data here, and my question is what to do with it. I mean, I'm going to sort of say a little bit more about how, from a historian's perspective, how some of this data can be taken forward into, actual using the data as historical source. And I'm going to sort of focus on Deccan and sort of the southern part of the Indian peninsula, because that's where I'm most comfortable with in dealing with or making comments of. So I'm going to share the presentation, and then stop my video, and I'll reappear at the end of the presentation. So this is exactly my point was that it is Deccan and beyond. What next after ancient Indian coins? And of course, this is a monumental and landmark publication. So how do we take the kind of things that are reported a bit further? So I mean, the first thing about is that what sort of struck me was this emphasis on being comprehensive, which is a very admirable aim. Although it is not in many instances worth, it becomes the subject of ancient Indian coins particularly is so fast evolving that even when the book was in print, I'm sure many new varieties would have turned up. So this comprehensiveness is a very ambitious objective for any ancient Indian coins. And of course, Wilfrid is not the first in this, and he has had antecedents, and right from Alexander Cunningham's Coins of Ancient India, which sort of put together the data of ancient Indian coins at that point. And then there was these British Museum catalogues, particularly Rapson's catalogue of Andhra and what was Satavahana coins and Western Kshatraps, and also Allen's catalogue, which was the 1936, the ancient Indian coins in the British Museum catalogue. But of course, then in the 1970s, Michael Michener came up with ancient and classical world volumes. And then subsequently to that, there was the Indo-Greek and Indo-Scythian volumes. Then quite late, about 20 years later, he came up with the coinage in South India. And then lastly, ancient trade and early coinages. So these books also kind of report a lot of data and make certain commentary about it. And as you can see, that there is this kind of unending lure of being comprehensive in this, and this sort of goes on and on and on. And every few years, there is another comprehensive book. There is the best usage of these books is, of course, as to aid to numismatic techniques of mainly classification, attribution, and actually describing the coins. And these books have been primarily an aid to coin collectors. I mean, coin collectors need a reference number to actually make sense of their collection. So this is primarily the focus. This has been primarily the focus of particularly books like of Michael Michener, for example. But there is a need to integrate these efforts into the wider historical discourse. And this is what is absolutely paramount and crucial, that we must make our subject that we all love so much accessible and audible to the wider world in that case. So this is where the real worth of these efforts can lie in future. So this is the data that is reported here is not only cataloging data for the benefit of collectors, but also how it can be sort of interpreted into a wider historical framework. And as a case in point, I was going to take Deccan, and there are quite a few chapters regarding Deccan here. Some of them are not in sort of numerical order, but there is the term Deccan is sort of writ large on many of the contents in either in terms of find spots or in terms of dynasties which at some point ruled over Deccan or were actually Deccani in their nature, all sorts of things. So when it comes to this kind of formative period, early historic period in Deccan, which is circa 250 BC to 250 AD, we have this notion that the given historical wisdom that we have know about Deccan is it's kind of linear. It uses texts, ancient Indian textual evidence, which is mainly from the corpus of semi-mythical texts called the Puranas, and it is also archaeologically very complicated. So this is where our known historical wisdom comes from. And by linear, I mean that it is just straightforward. It has this, the Mauryas appear in the south, and that is indicated by Ashokan inscriptions as sort of markers that there was Mauryan rule in the south, and the locations which are present in the Deccan Plateau. What happens after the Mauryas, of course, is not extremely well elucidated. Here, where the linear narrative sort of sets in, and then you have Mauryas, then Mauryas giving way to Shungas, Shungas giving way to Kanvas, and Kanvas ultimately giving way to Andhras or Satavahanas. And this is the kind of linear sequence that we see from the Puranic evidence. But of course, there are lots and lots of complicated questions regarding this, particularly, say, for example, let's say Satavahanas and their political and dynastic history. So, for example, how did the Satavahanas emerge? Where did they come from? What was the nature of structure of their polity? These are wider historical questions that coins can inform us on. When you go back to what we know, what is the given historical wisdom, when you open any standard historical textbook, then what you find in there, you ask questions about it. What is the veracity of this understanding, or where does this kind of narrative that we get is coming from? What is the chronology of it, and what is the evidential structure that actually underpins this whole narrative that we read on this? And most importantly, it's worth underlining that we got to move away from the textual framework that we have been sort of trying to fit this in, and approach the material from a materialist point of view. So what coins actually say. Several years, about 20 years earlier, when I was in the British Museum, Joe taught me the first lesson that he taught me was to just first look at the coins and say what the coins, look at the coins and look at what they are telling you. Then you go back and the coins will speak for themselves. That is the thing. So on that kind of, lines, there have been some recent interventions from the historians' world into this, and with particular regard to contributions made by B.D. Chattopadhyay and Aloka Parashar Sen in the last 5 or so years, have come out with some interesting shifting ideas about how to look at Deccan in this kind of period. What both of them have identified is what maybe coin collectors and numismatists have known all the time, that we got to focus on regions rather than dynasties or personages into understanding the historical structure or framework behind these things. And this is something that I have said even before I said. There was Rapson who sort of made an observation in 1906 that there is a certain peculiarity about, say, Satavahana or Deccani coins is that their typology is oriented towards a region. And I used this in my thesis, this particular characteristics. I called it a regiospecificity, and I used it to actually understand what the structure in that particular region was. How do numismatic methodologies inform us about political and historical developments within that particular region? But that kind of approach can then be applied to not just to Deccan, but to the entire Indian subcontinent. And this is something, a very significant aspect of ancient Indian numismatics that needs to be underlined. And here I've just kind of, vaguely mapped these areas, which are kind of macro cosms of political developments vis-a-vis the numismatics. So you have Punjab, Haryana, and the Himalayan foothills, eastern Gangetic plains, western Gangetic plains, the Chambal Betwa divide, the eastern Malwa, the central Malwa, and the western Malwa portions, the Tapi Valley and Khandesh, Vidarbha or Greater Vidarbha, including Telangana, and in deep south you have the northern Tamilakam and the southern Tamilakam. These are kind of roughly the areas where very specific, typologically very specific coins turn up in immediate post-Mauryan times. And the same approach, when you apply to in a sort of micro level by focusing on, say, on Deccan, then this is the kind of rough ideas that we get. And these are, for example, in the immediate post-Mauryan times where local uninscribed coinages were circulating, these are the kind of areas that these coinages can be mapped on. So there is, there is a kind of the Khandesh region, the central Maharashtra region, the south Vidarbha Telangana region, and the Vidarbha proper region, which is in blue here. So these are the areas which are yielding these coins. And within these regions, you have typical typologically very specific coins. So, from example, I'm sure many of these coins are listed in the book. Some of them might not be listed, but again, that's this is an emerging field. The coins just keep on coming every year, every month, every day, and particularly with the advent of social media and WhatsApp and everything, the data that is coming along is just it's absolutely difficult to keep up with the quantum that sort of comes your way. Anyhow, typical coins from north or eastern Vidarbha, you have the punch-marked uninscribed coins, local punch-marked series. Then you have coins which are struck with dies on cast flans, which is what you see on the top right here, and totally purely cast coins also, which you see at the bottom left. And what is also interesting is that there seems to be some sort of revitalization of these coins, because you have older coins which are being counterstruck and used again by newer types. So these coins kind of carry on in circulation with some sort of re-legitimization of their circulatory status. And these are aspects which are quite important from a historical perspective, which needed to be sort of decoded from a historian's point of view. Similarly, very recently we have been seeing a lot of these uninscribed die-struck coins coming up from central Maharashtra and Marathwada. Some of them are typical in terms of their symbolic program, the way the things are executed, the kind of social or religious commentary that they make in terms of their choice of iconography, what they actually want to depict. There is a distinct imprint of localization in all these matters. Here are examples from northern Maharashtra and Khandesh. Again, very, very specific types that are found from ancient sites such as Prakasha on the Tapi in Khandesh. So there is this particular frame of regionalization in their fabric, in their choice of striking methods, outlook, standards, everything. And what is quite interesting is that even though these coins do not actually bear any inscriptions, it is very, I wouldn't say easy, but at least it is possible to know where they're coming from once you actually get a hang of these characteristics that I've just mentioned. So that is something which is very interesting aspect of these coins. Gradually, they give way to inscriptional coinages, again in the same sort of manner. And here you have a rise of river and city-states in the Deccan. The coin on the top left is a coin which has the inscription Bena Kata on it, which means that the river valley of the Bena River. Similarly, coin in the center has Bhojakata, which was a city-state or an area that was western Vidarbha, and the city-state of Bhadravati that you see on the top right here, which was the city-state which is again located in eastern or southeastern Vidarbha. Similarly, the coin at the bottom has actually the depiction of a river on it. So the identity formation that you see reflected in these designs and in the choice of these inscriptions is a certain trait or certain leaning towards local identity that sort of gets added to these design features. Then we have the next stage where the inscriptional coinages actually name or start naming monarchs. And I must say that I'm saying this in the sort of in sections, but of course these sections might well be overlapping. So it is not that it's not that there are no watertight compartments between these two aspects. So what is quite interesting here is that the inscriptions, when they appear on coins, they indicate to us a certain degree of advent of what is called a script culture. And it's the question is the thing that people actually start writing instead of just indicating in a semiotic or a symbolic fashion. A script, an inscription is added to it. And this is very significant when at this time there is very little inscriptional evidence is on our hands. I mean, there are hardly any inscriptions between Ashokan inscriptions and early Satavahana inscriptions from the Deccan. So this is exactly where these early inscribed issues fit into in terms of their inscriptional evidence. And what do these inscriptions tell us is the presence of several ruling entities which are absolutely unknown to other branches of historical evidence. So they tell us something which absolutely is missed by everything else that we. So that makes these inscriptions and these inscribed coinages extremely crucial in terms of understanding various historical processes. The other interesting aspect is the choice of the symbolic repertoire that these coins have, and this is a kind of there is evidence enough to suggest that some of this it's a semiotic representation of identity. So some dynasties choose certain symbols, or some groups of rulers choose particular symbols to suggest their identity, either in terms of kinship, clan, or localization. So this is what is quite interesting. The identity forms are worth exploring further on the basis of that. Is it a regional identity? Is it dynastic identity? Is it a religious identity? All these identities can be reflected in the choice of what these people are trying to show on their thing. The intersection of these choices, as in it's the numismatic typology and its connection that one can build, is into this clan or kinship identities. So, I mean, I won't go into details here, but there are indications that a particular king, when he sort of goes into a neighboring area and starts issuing coins in that area, he adopts a typical symbolic program from that region. So that's what it is. So this is what from a historical perspective, what we get there is, which is a varied mosaic, and this does not really conform to the received wisdom that we talked about. There is no much indication of that linearity in terms of Mauryas, Shungas, Kanvas, Satavahanas, whatever that particular straight line thing was. And the post-Mauryan political landscape, particularly with regard to peninsular India, seems to be highly complicated. It's not really, fitting in with what the linear or what the existing historical wisdom tells us. And these are some of these examples of monarchical coinages from parts of Deccan. On the top left, you have a coin from Suryamitra, and on the top right is Satchabhadra. These are kings known entirely from eastern parts of Maharashtra and Vidarbha, which had Mitra and Bhadra ending names, and some of them, although again, numismatists might like to see them as two distinct categories. Some of them might be overlapping with each other in terms of time and space. That is something that we need to further find out. Similarly, at bottom left, there is a coin of Sebaka, and on the bottom right, this is a coin of from the Telangana or South Vidarbha region of completely unknown king otherwise, whose name was Harivayasiri. And none of these coins, none of these entities, political entities, are known from any other aspect of wisdom and of evidence. Sorry, and if you are lucky, you might find something in an inscription. But most of these things are completely unknown to any other branch of historical evidence. Similarly, in the central part of Maharashtra, we have coins on the top three here are issued by a king called Balamitra, who again was completely unknown for nearly 5 or 6 years ago. And then suddenly we find these coins, and they are again not just typologically. There is a variation here. The top three, the left coin on the left has a Srivatsa type, the one in the center is elephant type, and the one on the right is inscriptional with the symbol type. The two coins below are of a king called Usabhamitra or Rushabhamitra in Sanskrit. Again, completely unknown of just a few years ago, and we now absolutely have this. The same kind of trajectory of symbolic coinages giving way to inscriptional coinages, and with the symbolism being rooted in the identity of these dynasties, is much more prominently seen in the Tamilakam, which is the greater Tamil-speaking area. And this is the kind of frontier of an indigenous coinage tradition at this time, which is in terms of the symbolic repertoire. If you see at the basis of it, the typology of these coins is very much similar to what you see in say, Maharashtra or Malwa or other northern Indian places. There is a symbolic configuration here, and most of the times the story, the message of what this coin is trying to tell you is told through symbols. But what is also interesting here is that from a very earlier point onwards, there are symbols which have a very crucial dynastic slant to their choice. So, for example, the top right coin is Chola coin from the so-called Shangam age. Now, this is a very contentious term. I'm aware of it. We exactly don't know what Shangam age means in its greater details. But there is a lion, there's a tiger here, which was a Chola dynastic emblem. Similarly, the top right coin has this angular symbol on the reverse, which is the kind of a stylized fish, which was the Pandyan symbol. And the coin at the bottom left, the square coin, has bows and arrows on both sides. And that this was a dynastic emblem associated with the Chera dynasty. So even though these coins are entirely devoid of inscriptions, the choice of these symbols indicate that the symbols had a particular dynastic meaning, and this dynastic meaning then subsequently gets translated into an identity parameter for the issuers of these coins. What is also very interesting is that the bottom right-hand corner coin, the round coin, which is a big coin, it's from Sri Lanka, and this is where the kind of tradition then carries on into across the seas from the peninsular type of India. But what is also very interesting is that you might notice that this coin has a symbol which is a swastika standard, which is in a railing or on a yoke maybe. And this is a very distinct symbol for Sri Lanka. So again, much like the lion, the fish, the bow and arrow, these symbols were specific to specific political entities. It is quite likely that this particular symbol, the swastika on a yoke, was also very specific to a Sinhalese dynasty. So this is what is very significant. So and then what happens up in the north also is seen evidenced in coins in the Tamilakam. um, the inscriptions appear. So this is on the top left is a coin of a king called Kor Irumpurai, who was a Chera king from the Sangam period. The coin on the top right is a silver coin, obviously influenced by portraiture, maybe from 1st century AD, and it has the first part of the inscription is not correct, not clear, but it certainly ends in these two words called Kottai, and that is again an indication that it was a Sangam age Chera coin. And then on the bottom here you see a coin which has the Tamil Brahmi inscription, which reads Peru Aruti, and that is indicative of a Pandya king of the same period. So this is something which is seen. The advent of script culture, as I said, is also evident in Deep South, as it were. So then it sort of has this, other dynastic, sort of slightly later dynastic coins, maybe from 2nd century or 1st century AD, which again deploy these dynastic symbols in a much more elaborate kind of manner. So the Chola tiger here on the top left coin is quite clear. Similarly, the Pandyan fish is quite, again, like on the top right coin. The bow and arrow with an ankusha or elephant goad that you see on the Chera coin from the bottom, and the horse, which was a dynastic emblem probably for the Malayamana chiefs. So this sort of choice in terms of what the coins depict tells us, irrespective of whether they carry legends or not, who they belong to. So that's a very interesting aspect. So just to come to the conclusion of this short presentation, it is very much true that the formative period of Deccan as a socio-political entity is the so-called post-Mauryan period. This is the period where Deccan comes into its own being as a social point of political entity, and Deccan becomes really Deccan in this time. So this is what the coins actually tell us, or can tell us, is what are the constituent processes of state formation here. The emergence of clan and kinship polities and their sort of connections is very much evident from the onomastic, which is the naming of these kings, and also from this shared repertoire of symbols, and some of which emerge as dynastic symbols, and as we have just seen. The spatial mapping of these polities underlines the importance of regions in charting the kind of stories or narratives about urbanization, struggle for political power, who succeeds whom, what was exactly happening, and the numismatic characteristic of regio-specificity helps us establishing these regions in the first place. And this is again not just, I would stress here that this is not just applicable to Deccan and peninsular India, but it's a kind of pan-India, Indian subcontinent phenomenon. And this is again very crucial, that a book like Wilfrid's will lay down the data that one sees in terms of how these particular aspects can be historically fruitfully used. The numismatic evidence, because it is regionally oriented and it can be chronologically translated, it can also help in giving us a spatio-temporal placement of the polities that we are looking at. So this is again a very, it's like adding more meat to the skeleton of history that we know that from coins that can happen. And most importantly, this is such a total variance from the received wisdom that we've seen, that this was a kind of linear narrative, and it's a far more complicated picture that one can see. And to underline the importance of the book that we have on hands, so rigorously and religiously made available to us by Wilfrid, is that this is the kind of data that is now available for us to create these newer paradigm shifting dimensions of historical writing. So this is where my particular interest in this book is, because it gives me the foundational data which can then be interpreted historically for the benefit of the wider historical community, not just numismatists and coin collectors. So I would like to stop here by saying congratulations again to Wilfred on his remarkable achievement, and I would reappear on the screen and check if there are any questions, or indeed if the panelists have questions for me. We can certainly talk on camera, as it were. So thank you very much, and congratulations again, Wilfred, for this wonderful contribution. Thanks. There we are. I'm back again. Questions. Pankaj Tandon says to hosts and panelists, seems like a big question is who issued these coins? Might they have been issued for business communities rather than political entities? Quite a significant question. I think there is a mixture of both. It's not. There is certainly evidence to indicate that there were political statements were being made out of this, but of course coins are functional. I mean, they got to have a function, and political statement is not the primary function of the coins. It's the primary function is, of course, to serve as objects of medium of exchange. So it is possible that business communities might have been involved in this, and this is again this takes us back to the debate about questions like who issued the punch mark coins, for example. Was it a centrally operated apparatus that was behind it, or these coins that you see particularly in the pre-Mauryan times, the pre-Magadhan coins, the regional archaic punch mark coins, how much of that coinage was issued by a state or by a political entity, and if so, in what with what intention in mind. So that's that. I guess there are no further questions. Is there
can I say something about that?
Yes.
Question?
Yes, yeah, sure.
It's one of the things that has always been very clear to me is the organizational consistency of early Indian coinage. Although the coins don't tell us who are issuing them in the early stages, it's that sort of organizational structure that speaks to me of state activity. Of course, right down to the time in the 19th century, it's very clear that the state needs technicians to actually produce the coins, and quite often, in the 19th century, they would farm the actual production out to merchants. But I think the state control, I think, is normally there. I mean, there are periods when the state loses control and you get lots of imitations being made privately, but in general terms, I think the purpose is state control. And I think part of the confusion is the Nagama coins from the northwest, which have always been said to be guild coins, but perhaps they're just Nagama in the sense of a city or a township, and that these are local administrations making the coins. Again, the Nagama series is very consistent. It's a well-structured coinage. So again, one that's expected to be an administered coinage rather than a random production by merchants. Those are my limited views.
What I have in mind, Joe, is a spontaneous production of coinage by the most powerful business interest, maybe in consortium, eventually getting taken over by the state.
Well,
being the profit.
from my understanding of the way merchants behave, the last thing they want is to be controlled. We know this from the way Amazon and Google, etc. behave. It's much easier for them to control payments through using weighed amounts of metal and get agreement in the marketplace that their weight is accepted. If the state is in, if there is a coinage involved, it's a control mechanism, and I don't think merchants want control. Certainly that seems to be how coinage begins. It's a sort of transition from payments in kind, whether in metal or whatever, into a system that the state can control and make some money out of, and institute justice in the marketplace. So again, I think it's a state-led initiative, even if merchants do get involved.
All right. Okay. Well, on that note, I shall stop. Well, I shall end with me and